Post-structuralism started by questioning some of the central ideas of structuralism. Structuralism had said that language is a system of signs where each word gets its meaning by being different from other words. For example, the word cat is understood not because it reflects a real animal directly, but because it is not bat or cap or mat. But post structuralists, especially Derrida, asked how far this idea of difference can go. If every word only gets its meaning from other words, then meaning becomes an endless chain with no solid base. You never reach a final meaning. When you look up the meaning of a word in a dictionary, you find more words, and those words lead to other words, and so on. This shows that meaning is always moving, never fixed. Meaning is not something inside a word that you can clearly point to. It is always floating between words depending on what they are not, and always changing depending on where and how they are used. Because of this, post structuralists say that the relationship between the word, the signifier, and its meaning, the signified, is not stable. Even more, there is no true difference between signifiers and signifieds because any meaning can also become another signifier. This leads to a circular, endless process where meanings are always being delayed and reshaped. Reading becomes a process of tracing how meaning moves and shifts, not something stable. This also means that language does not just describe the world, it creates the way we see the world. Language is not something outside of us that we simply use. It shapes how we think and who we are. For Derrida, this endless movement of meaning shows that we can never be fully present in what we say or write. When I speak, I may feel like I am expressing myself directly. But even spoken words work by difference. Writing seems even more distant. Once I write something, it exists in the world without me, and others may read it in ways I did not expect. Writing seems to take away my voice. In Western philosophy, people have often believed that speech is more real than writing because it feels more direct and alive. Writing has been seen as dead, secondhand, or less true. But Derrida says this is a mistake. Writing and speech both depend on the same process of difference. Both are made of signs and both create meaning in the same unstable way. This idea challenges many beliefs from philosophy and religion. Philosophers have often looked for a single stable truth, something that would give meaning to everything else, like God, the self, or reason. Derrida calls this the search for a transcendental signifier, the ultimate sign that would explain all other signs. But he says this search is hopeless because every concept is part of the same system of language. Nothing stands outside the system. What we often think of as solid truths like freedom or democracy are actually just powerful meanings that have been repeated and accepted over time. They are not natural or eternal. They have become central meanings in our society, but they only make sense because other signs exist around them. Deconstruction is the method that post structuralists use to show how these central ideas are not as stable as they seem. Deconstruction looks at oppositions that structure our thinking, like man, woman, reason, madness, or culture, nature. These oppositions often hide the fact that one side is treated as better than the other. For example, In many cultures, man is seen as the center and woman as the opposite or the other. But this idea only works if woman is excluded or treated as lacking something. Yet, the idea of man also depends on woman. Without the other, the self cannot define itself. Deconstruction tries to show how these opposites fall apart, how they depend on each other, and how they can be turned around or reversed. Derrida's reading of texts often focuses on small, overlooked details that disturb the main message of the work. These may be side comments, footnotes, or strange images that don't fit. Derrida uses these points to show how the text contradicts itself. He believes this is not a special trick he is playing on the text, it is something the text does to itself because of how language works. There is always a kind of excess in language, a surplus of meaning that cannot be controlled. This is why texts are always open to interpretation. This is especially clear in literary texts, but it is also true of philosophy, science, and everyday speech. Writing never just says what we want it to say, it always says more or something else. Roland Barthes, another important structuralist, began as a structuralist but moved toward post structuralism. In his early books, he analyzed things like fashion, food, and literature using structuralist methods. But even then, his style of writing was playful and ironic. He was interested in how signs work, but also in how writing can go beyond meaning. Later, Barthes became more focused on the pleasure of the text, the joy of playing with language without needing to find a final meaning. In his book S.Z., he analyzed a story by Balzac by breaking into hundreds of small parts and applying five different quotes to it. He did not try to find one truth in the story, but showed how many different meanings could be created by reading it in different ways. For Barthes, reading was not about finding the meaning the author intended, it was about enjoying the process of interpretation. Barthes even said that the author was dead, not literally, but as the center of meaning. A text does not belong to the author once it is written. It belongs to the reader, and every reader brings different experiences and ideas. This means that meaning is created by the reader, not fixed by the writer. Literature is not something we receive, but something we make. This idea is connected to modernist ideas in literature, which question traditional ways of writing and meaning. But post structuralists went further. They said that language is always unstable and that all meaning is a kind of misunderstanding. The political background to post structuralism is important too. In 1968, students in France protested against the government and capitalism. There was a sense of revolution, but in the end, the movement failed. Some post structuralist thinkers were influenced by this failure. They turned away from big political theories and looked at smaller, local forms of resistance. They believed that power is everywhere, not just in governments or institutions, but also in language and everyday life. This led to a new kind of politics that was more focused on individuals and small groups rather than big movements. Some people used post structuralism to avoid political questions altogether. They said everything is uncertain, so we cannot know what to do or what is right. Not all post structuralists agreed with this. Derrida, for example, said that deconstruction is a political act. It shows how our ways of thinking are controlled by hidden rules and structures. By questioning these, we can begin to change them. Derrida did not believe in total freedom or chaos. He believed that meaning and truth exist, but they are always part of a larger history and always open to change. He wanted to make us more aware of the forces that shape our thoughts and values. The feminist movement also took up some ideas from post structuralism. Feminists showed how the division between male and female had been treated as natural when it is actually a product of culture and power. They argued that this division supported male control. Feminists used deconstruction to challenge these ideas and show how gender is created by language and social practices. But they also criticized some versions of post structuralism for ignoring real world oppression. Language is important, they said, but we must also deal with material issues like work, family, violence, and inequality. Feminist theory combined insights from post structuralism with political action and a concern for real social change. Post structuralism had many different sides. Some people used it to support new ways of thinking and acting. Others used it to avoid making any strong claims at all. Some critics, especially in the United States, focused only on the idea that meaning is always unclear. They said all texts destroy their own meanings and that nothing can ever be known for sure. This kind of thinking made it hard to talk about truth, politics, or even ethics. If all meaning is just game of science, how can we say anything matters? But not all post-structuralists agreed with this view. They wanted to show that meaning is shaped by power and that by changing language we can also change society. One danger of post structuralism is that it can become too focused on language and forget about the world outside of it. Some thinkers argued that we need to remember that language is something we use in real life. We speak, write, and read as part of our daily actions. Language is not something on a page. It is tied to what we do, how we live, and how we relate to others. This means that even though meaning is never fixed, we still make choices, take actions, and live with consequences. Post structuralism helped us to see that meaning, truth, and identity are not simple. They are shaped by language, history, and power. But it also reminded us that we cannot stop thinking, speaking, and acting. Even if meaning is never final, we still live in the world and try to make sense of it. Literary theory has followed this journey from structure to text, from science to meanings, from authors to readers, from certainty to uncertainty. It has opened up new ways of thinking about literature, language, and life. It has challenged us to look again at what we think we know and to ask what lies behind our beliefs. Whether we agree with all its ideas or not, post structuralism remains a powerful part of how we understand literature and the world today.